I'd like to call to order this June 9th, 2014 special meeting of the Forest Hills Board of Education. Mr. Tepfer, if you please call roll.
Mrs. Bissinger.
Here.
Dr. Heiss. Mr. Hemmelgarn.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Fruman.
Here. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The safety exits, we have one here, one all the way in the back of the room, and then, of course, the two on the side over here. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Tepfer?
Mrs. Bissinger.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Hemmelgarn.
Yes.
Mr. Fruman.
Yes. Item 3.1, Human Resources Report. Ms. Carnahan, please.
Thank you to the board for entertaining the HR report this evening. This does allow us to move forward with some staffing items. Item A, resignation. We do see Administrator Megan Stacy as our District Elementary Programs Coordinator. We have 3 teachers who will be leaving Forest Hills and moving on. A couple non-teaching staff. Item B was a change of assignment. Rob Fellows will be leaving Wilson as assistant principal and moving to Anderson as their assistant principal. Item D, James Heimbaugh, district ticket taker. And then item E, we do have the hiring of 2 administrators, John Bailey as an assistant principal at Nagel, and Emily Stanyard as an assistant principal at Anderson. And Emily is actually here this evening with her family. Gives a wave. There's Emily Stanyard. This is the board. And the superintendent recommends the board approve the HR report as presented.
I move that we approve the HR report.
Second.
Mr. Tepfer?
Mrs. Bissinger.
Yes.
Mr. Hemmelgarn.
Yes.
Dr. Heiss.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Fruman.
Yes. Welcome. No, you can't leave. Your kids have to stay.
Did you notice she was wearing the orange tonight?
Very nice.
And her husband, too, I did notice.
Very nice.
Item 4.1 is the facilities discussion. Thank you all for coming for our continued discussion of the facilities issues. As most of you know, I believe, that Mr. Fox has conducted a survey for us, and we have Mr. Fox with us this evening to present to us the results of that survey. So, Mr. Fox, thank you.
I will probably start up here at the mic, but I may be running back and forth to the screen to point things out, but I've got a pretty loud voice, so it should be okay. This is the preliminary research summary, and this literally completed on Friday, so this is very preliminary, but most of the key data is in there. We're missing a few things, and I will do a very, very detailed final summary as well, but next slide. We're going to go over the objectives and the methodology, and then the preliminary results. The objective was to secure feedback from residents on facilities issues and communication of information. We tested 2 different plans to gauge community intent to vote in favor of or against 2 options for a possible bond issue and the reasons for the option. The plans were, as I encouraged the district to be, measurably different. In pretty simple terms, the higher price plan, the $173 million plan, the difference there was that it was going to include 4 larger, totally new elementary schools, closing 2 schools to be determined. And the less expensive plan, the $98 million plan, was going to renovate 5 of the 6 elementary schools and build a totally new Wilson Elementary School. Also a little bit different in the way that was presented for the high school and the middle school. The higher price plan was going to have a more total renovation of both the high schools and the middle school, and the $98 million, the lower cost plan, was going to have a little bit less, but still a renovation of those schools. So 2 very different plans were tested. Also, second to last bullet there, we determined the awareness of and opinions on issues related to these plans. their relationship to current teaching and learning plans, their financial implications, and a focus on having 6 renovated versus 4 new elementary schools. And then we looked at the feedback both overall and by demographics where appropriate. The way these research studies usually work is we start out and we move from what we call the unaided to the aided. So after we tested the 2 plans, and they were presented in a different order every other interview, got people's responses to them in their own words. Why are you for this? Why are you against this? And then tested a number of different hypotheses. If we go to the next slide, this sort of, okay, well, first, the actionability of this is to provide a go, no-go decision for placing the bond issue on the ballot in November and which option to pursue. And then if it is placed on the ballot, to determine the best sales message, positives to emphasize, negatives to address, and sources for information for publicity and marketing and other communications to ensure passage. Okay, now the next slide. This is what we researched, awareness of the school operations in general, the top priority in the district, opinions on your facilities, and we did have a study from late 2013 to compare these two, and there are some interesting changes already in opinions versus that study. The effectiveness of your communications programs in the district and specific sources of information, how they get information on the schools. And then reaction to the possible facilities plans in terms of voting intent and unaided reasons why. And then here are the aided questions. We looked at scaled rating questions, 12 specific facilities and financial related hypotheses, how strongly they agree or disagree with those, the relative importance of 10 possible selling points for the bond issue, and then awareness of 5 specific issues. And again, all of this in the spirit of this being marketing research, not just polling, but research that will help you market this to the constituents out there to ensure its passage. Okay, next slide. The study entails 500 completed telephone and online interviews. As scheduled, we completed 333 telephone interviews, May 27th through June 6th, which was Friday. This was done among a random sample of households from lists of registered voters. We intended to have 167 online interviews. We got over 1,000 responses online. In fact, within, I think you put this up in an email on a Friday afternoon, and within 5 hours we had 500 responses. We took all 1,000 of them when it was done, closed it down on May 30th, and then I randomly took 167 of the 1,000 plus and included those with the telephone interviews in order to have our sample size of 500. Every participant, both phone and online, was screened for being a resident of the Forest Hills School District, a registered voter, and planning to vote in the November election. And the 2 plans and their voting related and reason why questions were presented in a different rotation every other interview to avoid order bias. And anytime there was a series of questions like the 12 agree-disagree questions or the 10 importance questions or the awareness questions, those were always rotated through as well. So totally prevented order bias in the presentation of all the questions. Just a little bit of statistical stuff for those of you interested. The error range is plus or minus 4.4% at the 95% confidence level. The really key thing to look at is sort of that third bullet down. For comparisons between 2 questions, approximately 6 points of difference are necessary for statistical significance. So if something is 53% and something is 51%, they're considered statistically equal. But if there's 6 points difference between 2 questions or 9 points of difference within 1 question, such as in favor or against, if you've got 9 points of difference there, you've got statistical significance at the 95% confidence level, which is the standard level of the research industry. Okay, next. All right, very important, what this summary covers, and then a little bit of what it doesn't cover. As I mentioned, the interview was just completed this past Friday. There are over 1,000 open-ended questions and other specified responses being coded right now by my statistical people. And while those are still in the process of being coded and tabulated, I do not have any percentage results from the open-ended questions on why are you in favor or why are you against. So the final report will include those. This summary, third bullet, includes the closed-ended questions only. It's primarily the key questions relating to facilities and voting intent. I have left out a few of the other ancillary questions for the purposes of tonight's presentation. I do have some examples of responses on reasons for and against the plans that I got from the online responses, just to kind of show you and give you an idea of what some people were saying, why they were for and why they were against. Do have some of the cross tabulations by key segments. Again, I'll be diving deeper into the cross tabulations for the final report. This written report does not have any commentary. It doesn't have any recommendations. They will all be in the final analysis next week. But at the very end of this presentation, I want to show you some perspective on some other districts, which will kind of give you an idea of what will be recommended in terms of the go, no-go decision. Okay, now we're into the results. And I'm going to track these fairly chronologically through the way the survey tracked, if you were participating in it. We asked, which of the following do you consider to be the top priority in the district? And we gave them 5 choices. Again, we rotated them through, and they were able to select 2 out of the 5 choices. Among these 5 choices, 45% of the sample selected improving facilities as a top priority, 35% keeping up with the latest in education, teaching, and technology, 30% improving students' performance and the academic standing, 27% improving the financial position, and 13% the ability to compete with surrounding districts. I don't have this data right now, but I am in the final report going to compare this to other districts, but I can just tell you off the top of my head that in many cases, improving facilities is not number 1, even in the case where a district needs a new high school, needs new facilities. So this is sort of the first good indication here that people are facilities-oriented here and understand what's going on, with 45% saying that's one of the top priorities. Next slide. This is one that we could benchmark against the late 2013 research, and we asked the question in the exact same language. Opinion of buildings and classrooms, would you say they were good, adequate, poor, or have no opinion?
John, could I interrupt you just for
Yeah.
a second, please? What 2013 research, are you talking about Paul Fallon's study?
Yes.
Okay, Paul Fallon's study.
Okay. 5% rated them good versus 6% in 2013. 53% adequate versus 47% in 2013. Now, here's a statistically significant difference. 24% this time poor versus only 14%. So even from late 2013 to late May, early June of 2014, you've got a larger percentage of this district considering the buildings and classrooms, in their opinion, to be poor. And that really came from the no opinion, need more information. So somehow they've gotten more information and more people are rating them poor. Next. Another one that we tested, that was tested in the Fallon study in 2013. What is your opinion of the building's appearance and physical condition compared to other nearby districts? 11% this time said it was better versus 21% in 2013. That's statistically significantly different. 50% about the same. 31% not as good versus only 12% about 6 months ago. So again, you've really moved the needle to at least educating the community that your facilities need improvement here in the appearance and physical condition. Next one. Now this is interesting. We did not have this question in the previous study, but we asked also, what is your opinion of the buildings offering the latest in education, teaching, and learning compared to other nearby districts? This whole theme of tying the facilities improvement to sort of modernizing teaching, learning, education trends of the 21st century came out of my being at a facilities committee meeting about a month ago, and we threw in a number of questions here that sort of tied this together. So interestingly, while they thought the facilities were not really as good appearance-wise, 47% think that the facilities are better than other nearby districts, 32% about the same, 11% not as good, and 11% don't know. For whatever reason, we really didn't explore this other than that, but there are a couple questions later on that do tie the whole STEM to the facilities, et cetera. All right, this is the concept. I won't read through this verbatim, but everybody on the phone read this concept. If they didn't understand it, they read it again. It was verbatim like this in the online study. This was the higher cost plan concept, $173 million. The property tax involved would be $233 per every $100,000. And this did include a state rebate of 15%, or approximately $24 million, that could possibly be available to lower the tax burden long term. And then we sort of had the or else factor. If the bond issue were not to pass, the district would need to spend approximately $600,000 to $1 million in the operating budget if this didn't pass. So this is the way the first concept was presented. We're going to focus on the higher cost plan first and then go to the lower cost plan. Again, these were presented in a different rotated order every other interview. This is the key question in the study. This is the one that has tended to be fairly predictable in most districts. If the election were held tomorrow, would you be strongly in favor, somewhat against, or strongly against? In this case, for the higher cost plan, 40% total were in favor, 16% strongly. In cases in other districts where I've seen numbers below 50, I've immediately recommended that they don't go ahead. You really need to be in the high 50s or higher to go ahead in something like this. 32% were strongly against, 55% total against. And really, one of the keys, excuse me, is to look at the demographics, excuse me. Every district has at least 60% empty nesters, people who are less likely to vote in favor of a bond issue or a tax levy. So we always want to look at this by age, by having children in the schools. So 40% total in favor. This jumped to 48% if they currently have children in the Forest Hill schools, but didn't get above 50. It jumped to 55% if they were under age 51, but it was only 32% if they were age 51 plus. There was a skew towards education as well, 43% if they were college grad or higher versus 31% if less than a college grad. And then 51% of these people were also in favor of the lower cost plan. So that's the higher cost plan. Next slide, please.
Hang on a sec. From a
Yep.
methodology standpoint, you consider top two box as a yes vote?
That has been predictable in other districts for the most part.
Yeah, just to show you a few examples here, I've got a page of why people are strongly in favor and a page of why people are strongly against. And some of these are general comments just in terms of being in favor of new facilities in general, and others are really specifically looking at the plan. Something like we do not plan on staying in Forest Hills to go on serious improvements within the school district. It's time. We need to invest in the future. Our buildings are in poor shape. Addresses replacement cycle concerns. I believe the high schools need to be renovated, et cetera, et cetera. These are reasons for being in favor of the higher cost plan. Next slide. Why they're strongly against. I will tell you that in every other district, tax and financial reasons are always far and away the main reason for being against. And I will tell you just from eyeballing these right now, that is not necessarily the main reason for being against here in Forest Hills. Certainly some not happy about raising taxes, too expensive, but there are a lot of people who immediately on an unaided basis jump on, I like 6 elementary schools, I don't want to lose any of them. The 4 elementary option is way too expensive. Way school closing 2 elementary schools will greatly increase the distance, et cetera, et cetera. Renovation to new is much more cost effective. So again, these have not been tabulated yet, but I would imagine that compared to other districts, the negatives about financial issues are going to be significantly less than they normally are. And people really picked up more on the plans and the difference between the two plans. This is the lower plan cost concept. It was, as it was presented in the research, $98 million, $132 per year instead of $233 on every $100,000 of a home's market value. No significant operational cost savings associated with this plan, whereas the other one did have some operational cost savings. And this was for renovating 5 of the 6 current elementary schools and building a totally new Wilson Elementary. Next slide. Whereas the higher cost plan had 40% total in favor, this has 59%. 27% strongly in favor, 34% total against. Now, interestingly, the age skews and some of the other correlations that we saw demographically for the higher cost plan were not as pronounced and didn't even exist in some cases here. 65% in favor if they currently have children in the schools, 57% if previously or never, whereas you saw a much greater drop-off for previously or never on the higher cost plan. 64% in favor if under age 51, still 50% if age 51 to 60. I mean, it's interesting.
younger, middle is kind of down, and then 61% if age 61 plus. So we really didn't see a large drop-off for the really older people. 76% are also in favor of this plan if they're in favor of the higher cost plan, but there were no differences at all, significantly speaking, by gender, by education, or by phone versus online research interview. They were really flat. In fact, phone versus online, one was 59.7 and the other was like 58.7. So no difference there at all in this key question. Next slide.
Some reasons why they're in favor of the $98 million plan. Again, a very general thing. My husband and I will always vote for school issues. I think more would be in favor since there is no large change for students. Schools are not being torn down and causing havoc in the district. More cost effective, keeps the current status, preserves the current school configuration. Again, people really picked up on this. We're going to keep 6 elementary schools as opposed to 4. Reasons against. Next slide. Not a lot of, again, tax and expensive related. If one was too expensive, I would look at consolidated grade schools. They are fine. Still no long-term plan. These were really more general comments, waste of money. It's not the building that teaches the child. And again, I would expect when we analyze this question relative to other research studies, there will be a lot fewer, I don't want my taxes raised. People really do recognize the need for this in this district. And there's some questions coming up that will really solidify that as well.
Next slide. We asked them the preference then between the two, and a clear win, as would be expected when you looked at the previous questions. 56% said they prefer the $98 million plan. 17% preferred the $173 million plan. 3% like them both equally. 17% do not like either plan. That doesn't mean that you're going to get 83% voting in favor of this thing. But it is interesting. That's a relatively low number. Sometimes we see bigger numbers than that. 5% said they needed more information and 2% don't know. But a clear win in a paired comparison question between the lower cost plan and the higher cost plan. And I think when we look at the verbatims and the analysis of the open-ended question, it's going to be fairly strongly because of the 6 elementary schools, not necessarily that it was a higher or lower cost plan. Okay, we then had 12 different statements that we looked at on an agree-disagree basis. And I want to pick out the ones that really are pertinent to this decision here. 73% agree that regardless of the various construction options, something needs to be done soon to improve the facilities. 63% agree that better facilities will improve a student's academic performance. 53% agree that if the bond issue passes, they'll pay higher property taxes, but will get more than what they put into these taxes out of their home when they sell it. That's a question I ask in every district, and I'll be able to compare that to every district. I think that's relatively high for that question. 52% agree that the district should keep 6 elementary schools and avoid redistricting versus 27% disagree. 52% agree versus 25% disagree that the district should keep 6 elementary schools, not 4, even if it means that all but one of the schools are renovated and not brand new. So that really addressed the issue head on. Now, this is sort of a wild card here. We put in a question about all-day kindergarten. 51% agree, 25 strongly, that any facilities plan needs to include all-day kindergarten, even at an additional cost, we didn't tell them what it was, to ensure that the district attracts new families for the long term. 31% disagree. So you might have a decision here, if you go with the lower cost plan, to maybe include all-day kindergarten in there. We haven't tested that specifically in that combination, but this was an interesting positive agreement in terms of the need for all-day. 40% agree and 46% disagree that the current schools meet the needs of students in terms of space, safety, security, climate, comfort, energy efficiency, and technology. 36% agree that the residents have been taxed enough, 52% disagree. This is another one that I always ask in every school district, and we'll be able to compare that. But again, this number seems low, which is encouraging for you.
And 24% agreed that the district should have a facility plan that includes all its schools at once, instead of doing this in stages. 62% disagreed. If both of these had come in under 50%, we might be recommending maybe you do it in stages. But I think the stronger numbers for the 98% seem to point towards, yeah, and this is another way of them saying we don't want to spend $172 million, we're going to spend $98 million. But I guess if they had their choice, they'd rather see it done in stages than all at once.
Let me ask you a question about the top two that are clearly addressing the 6 elementaries.
Yeah.
Tell me how I should think about that versus the results between, the dramatic difference between what we call the high-cost and low-cost program, with the low-cost program being 6 elementaries. This is 52%, that was...
59%, but I think if you look at the agree versus disagree, these are the people, you're really comparing, this is even a more pronounced difference. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I want to understand...
Here we're forcing them to think about it, whereas the other one...
Other factors are at play.
There are multiple variables.
Okay.
All right, would you explain to me what you and Randy clearly understood there? What did I just miss?
Randy, you want to take a turn at that?
Well, go ahead. I just want to make sure I understood.
Okay. I think what Randy was asking was the total in favor for the 6 elementary school version was 59, and the other one was 40. Okay, 19 points of difference here. 52% agree, 27 to 25% disagree. That's a wider spread. Okay.
And this question zeroed in on the elementaries, where the other one was obviously the broader plan. I just want to understand if there was anything that was driving that we should be aware of, but you explained it with the...
Yeah, I mean, this
disagreed.
focused on this one, this
Yeah.
isolated this one issue and made them think about it. Whereas when they're saying, do I want to vote in favor of it or not, it might be the 173 million, it might be the 4 elementary schools, it might be something else.
I'm with you.
And again, 52 minus 27 is 25, and the other difference is 19. That's not statistics. All right, next slide. I'll stay up here. Importance of selling points. We tested 10 different points. And again, this is really to help you with the marketing of this, with the communication of it, to get the word out to the various age segments. 85% said it was important, 50% very important. The facilities plan is necessary to keep up with the latest teaching and learning, particularly in the areas of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. 81% say it's important that the schools are needed for the long-term future. This is always the most important factor when I've done this in other districts. 74% important that if a bond issue fails, the school district will require sizable operating budget increases. It's sort of the or else factor, including future operating levies. Again, not tremendous significant difference here, except everything on the first page is probably more important than stuff on the next page. Important that current elementary high schools are inadequate in terms of factors such as space, safety, etc. 72% important that the state of Ohio has determined that 8 of the 9 schools in the district have serious needs for renovation or replacement. And this was something that we actually told them up front in the introduction to the survey. Next slide. And these drop off. 66% important that without new and improved schools, the area will not be attractive to families to move. Home values will decline, not quite as important as some of those other factors. This really only applies to the higher cost version. If there's an opportunity for the Forest Hills District to receive approximately 15% rebate from the state, but that was only really applying to the higher cost version. 63% important that consolidation of schools will create cost savings in energy and operations. And then 55% said it was important that if there are renovated or new Forest Hills District schools, performance of students will improve. So again, the really key important factors are the long-term future and back to the previous slide. Long-term future, the latest in teaching and technology, for the or else factor, the inadequacy, which is really tied to that. And this is also tied to that the state of the schools are at. Last series of questions, we asked for awareness of some of these other points. And there are opportunities here. We asked if you were highly aware, somewhat aware, or totally unaware. 59% said they were highly aware that the high schools and elementary schools were built 37 to 55 years ago. That's pretty important there. 54% were highly aware of the STEM education trend requiring improved learning space and technology. 54% aware of this. We asked them before today. We were obviously being aware when we were reading the survey. That 8 of the 9 schools have serious needs as determined by the RCC. 44% were highly aware that the district spends less per student than the state average, and 41% were highly aware that the district has had a 30% cut in state funding and is receiving less state funding in 2007. So again, about half or a little more than half are not highly aware. These are things that you really need to make your constituents aware of, as well as some of those other factors that were important in the market.
These are, to me, surprisingly high numbers. Was any of this data covered in the preamble with the pre-read that they got before?
The 8 of 9 was, but again, we said before today. Now, this is research, and people don't like to seem dumb, and these numbers are probably inflated.
Yeah.
So that tends to happen when you ask how aware are you. The totally unaware numbers were pretty small. And those are okay, next slide. This is where I want to give you some perspective on other districts as a caution. I first started doing these studies in the district where I live, which is Wyoming. And I've said this to Dr. Jackson and to Rick Tepfer. Every time I go into a district and I start to talk about Wyoming, I get interrupted and somebody says, well, we're not Wyoming. And what they mean by that is, either Wyoming is some supposedly fabulous reputation district in terms of education. I hope so. My kids went there. But more likely, Wyoming is a district where the education dollars depend virtually 100% on the residents. There is no industry in Wyoming. There is no retail other than a tiny shopping district, and it is entirely community supported. And Wyoming passes just about every levy that we do. Every research study that I've done since 1998, and I've done 5 of them, has led to a vote. And again, Randy, the top 2 box has been in the high 50% range, low 60s even for some, and it's predicted the vote within 1 to 2 percentage points. The one time in early 2009, absolutely in the teeth of the recession, when we were testing a new middle school, it came in at 43%. It was recommended to delay the building plan process. We waited 2.5 years, came back with another research study where the top 2 box was 74%, and darned if the vote didn't come in at 73%. That's Wyoming. Milford, nearby here, this was for an operating levy, so different from what we'd be asking for here, a capital facilities improvement levy. But the research that was done for them indicated 57% total in favor. The first time they went out to a vote in November of 12, they lost by 300 votes out of 21,000. So they were at, 49.9, let's call it. They came back in May of 13. They hired a full-time PR person, put them on the project. They didn't go up against the presidential election, and they got 60% of the vote. So a couple of different factors there, but again, the original prediction was 57%. It did not come in there. Winton Woods and Southwest, 2 districts that were looking for facilities improvements, have some academic and other issues, showed 43% and 38% respectively, and we didn't go ahead with those. Next page. These 2 are really key. These are 2 studies that I did earlier this year. Again, very, very different types of districts from Forest Hills. Dover is a small town about 30 miles south of Canton. They had a bond issue for a new high school that we tested. It came in 56% total in favor, top 2 box. In the research, the vote lost with only 45% in favor. Madison Lake County, which was an online-only study, and this is why you don't do online-only studies. You've got to do phone research and physically talk to the older people. That came in 65% total in favor, and that was for an operating levy, and it lost with only 31% in favor. So the way I would sort of summarize all of this, at least for the lower cost plan,
is cautious optimism. If the lower cost plan as well had come in at 40% or even 45% or maybe even 50%, I would probably in the final analysis recommend not going ahead, just because when you're asked to put your money where your mouth is, sort of similar to the awareness issue, you might not be as strongly positive about it. In this case, you're at 59%. And I think really the final analysis, I want to really look at those open-ended questions on the reasons why they're for and against, just to see if they recognize in their own words that there is a need to do something. Certainly the question that we asked them on agree, disagree says, yes, there's a need to do something. And I think even between the last research study that was done in late 13 and now, the district has become more educated on the need that they have to do something. So I think that concludes my presentation, yeah. And I will open this up to any questions.
When do you think, John, that you'll have the final report, including the responses in these open-ended questions?
Certainly sometime next week.
You touched on this earlier, but I want to make sure I absolutely understand your methodology. And it has to do with the difference between the random phone survey and the, I'll call it the opt-in online.
Yeah.
The thought of using something that wasn't randomly selected, it's very foreign to me. I just don't understand that. But you did say that they came in very similar.
On the key question, literally 1 percentage point difference on the top 2 box.
Okay.
Now, the internals, there might be 7-point swing on strongly in favor, somewhat in favor on those. And I will include all that in the report. And again, if you look at it by age and everything else, the differences were much more pronounced for that more controversial, higher cost, tear down 2 schools version by demographics than they were for the more conservative approach.
John, we decide on a plan and move forward with it. We're going to work to communicate whatever plan it is to the community, educate them, basically sell the plan. Can we count on greater support after we do a campaign than we're seeing in your survey now? And does that 40% on the 173 million become something greater?
I have not seen it become greater. I've only seen it become less. And I talked to them in Dover. What happened, okay? They frankly are such a small district. They didn't have a full-time PR person. And they feel like they didn't get the right people out to vote. You have to get, and again, I'm not telling you to keep the older people from voting, but you need to get the people who are school affiliated, the parents of students, you got to get them out to vote. And that's more difficult in a May election, hopefully, than it is in a November election. On the other hand, Milford, which went in November of 12 up against the presidential election, going in, they were sort of skittish. They didn't know, are more Republicans going to come out? Are more Democrats going to come out? Are they going to be for the levy, against the levy, et cetera, et cetera? And they lost by this much. They went in May and really put an effort out. I would talk to the Milford folks about the difference between what they did in November and May to get the people out to get this thing passed, because that's really half the battle. I mean, more so than what you tell them is getting the right people out to vote.
Yeah, I'm asking a little bit different question.
Yeah.
I'm asking if we assume we can get the vote out, we've educated them now, does that needle move from whether it's 40% for the 173 million?
As I said, I've never seen it go up. I've seen it be within, maybe in Wyoming it was up 1% or 2%. But, in Milford it went from 57 to 60, but it was already at 57. But if you're asking me, in any way, shape, or form, would I recommend going with the $173 million plan, the answer is no. From 40%, you're not going to get there.
I think it's sort of, easy isn't the right word, but it's understandable to look at the one plan versus the other when you're talking either on the phone with somebody or doing an online survey. what concerns me and has always concerned me with the less, the less costly plan is that I don't see how people are going to understand how it's different than when it was out there before. I mean, we're talking about more significant renovations. I get it. But do you think people are going to get it when we go out?
Well, I think it's up to us to...
Yeah, you need to communicate to them exactly what those renovations are going to be. You need to show them pictures, which are worth 1,000 words. I mean, clearly, people don't like change, okay? I mean, when...
People here do not like change.
Well, when we were looking at new middle schools in Wyoming, we actually did 2 research studies. One was, which of these 3 options do you want? Tear it down and build completely new, tear down part of it, or keep the old school and renovate? And it was overwhelming to keep the old school and renovate. And the cost wasn't that different. In fact, I think it might have even been a little less to tear it down and build new. Yeah, but it's the same thing here.
I know it's up to us, and we've talked about a PR person, but sort of what just frustrates me, and we talked about this, we've talked about it internally, and we've talked about it at the Wilson PTA meeting, is that even Wilson didn't come out to support a new school last time. And it's, I mean, I don't get that. But I know it's up to us. And obviously, over the last year, people's knowledge has increased, which is really, really encouraging. And Jim and I kept, and Tony and I, because I sit by them, we were all kind of commenting as you were going through this, that that's encouraging. So.
I would also say, as the non-board member the last time, what I constantly heard and almost felt was that we either thought it was going to pass easily or that it was a secret sometimes, so I don't think there was as much aggressive information because the amount of it was smaller than usual. Maybe too much was taken for granted, and which this time I don't see us taking anything for granted. Also, John, you've referred several times to the full-time PR person, and I guess I would ask Dallas, is it and in other districts, is that a position that we're talking about that we have open that would be a district position that would do that as well, or is that what we would equate to our levy committees and having somebody on that committee who their role is going to be pushing PR out every day? How does that
Kind of
look?
both. Getting the right PR, not just person, but the whole marketing campaign and strategy together is going to be key. We are in the process of doing that now and in regards to person, but it's also then looking at the levy campaign in general. And having that person and or group of people work directly with that campaign committee is going to be vital.
But we're
Make
looking
sure-
at hiring a
Yes.
full-time person. That job, is it posted yet?
Yes.
And just to be clear, that's not an incremental position, that's filling an empty position, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
just so people don't think we're
With the
doing
change
something
job
extra just
description.
because of
I
the
mean,
levy.
Right.
do you have a public resource officer kind of on staff now or not?
Well, not right now.
Yeah, okay.
But what Dallas said there that all of us may not have heard kind of at the end there, with a different job description, it's going to be different than
Yes.
what we're used to. That's important.
And again, a grassroots committee is good also. Get as many people involved in this thing as you can in the community.
I want to go back to Jim's question earlier. How much, and if you didn't test with this afterwards, then you may not know the answer to this, but, okay, you did a survey at the beginning of the process, and then the committee did everything they could to get information out there. And you're saying that that did or didn't have an influence on the people's opinions of voting yes or no after they got the information through the course of the campaign?
I'm saying a good PR campaign is sort of the price of admission. You've got to have that or you're not even going to
Okay.
get up to the level in the research.
Okay. Because obviously, nobody knows what our plan is right now, because
Yeah.
we don't know. We haven't
Yeah.
decided.
Yeah.
But I just want to see how much influence that will have on the outcome if you've done pre and post surveys to see what kind of a impact information, and we've said it over and over and over, that's key to making this work, is people to understand what our predicament is and what we're going to deliver.
When did the OFCC declare this, 8 out of 9?
Late 2013.
Okay, before or after the Fallon survey?
After,
After, okay, so there's a piece of information that probably influenced, the response here. Let me throw a question at you. What about the all-day kindergarten issue?
We've talked about it. We'd like to find a way to provide all-day kindergarten. It's an additional cost.
What would that would make 98 million, what, approximately?
The cost of the facilities alone would increase it substantially.
Yeah.
Several $1 million. Not doable, but then it's the cost of maintaining that program district-wide.
For you, our strategist, would you recommend adding that in as a way to increase votes? Or do you think-
That could be a way, yeah.
Or is the incremental cost?
Well, if you're telling me it goes from 98 to 105 or something, yeah, that's probably palatable. If you tell me it goes from 98 to 130, yeah, no.
It's not going to be above 107.
Yeah, that's right, it can't be above 107, that's right. That's right.
Let me ask a question, John.
Yeah.
We have talked amongst the board and in session regarding incrementally bringing all-day kindergarten in. And part of this plan could conceivably be the space for that to happen, and then as we move down the road, work more and more towards all-day kindergarten. Currently, we have none. But there is a need, at least for a percentage of our community, for an all-day program. And that's incrementally, I think.
Would it only be at one school, or could you put it at?
It would be at all.
Okay.
Or
That would
at
help.
least to serve all.
Yeah. I mean, clearly, one issue in this community is location. I want my neighborhood school nearby.
So, like I said, it
Yeah.
might not be at all, it depends on what that incremental step is, but it would definitely be to serve all.
Yeah.
So it could be at 3 of the 6 or
Yeah.
something like that, or whatever that might be.
Mhm. Other questions?
I have a question, not for you, it
Okay.
might be for you. Let's assume we go with the lower cost plan, are we going to look at some of the sort of, there aren't that many, but sort of, there are some odd anomalies about where people go to school, and I'm just sort of thinking personally where we are, we talk about close schools, well, Maddox is down the road from us, but we go to Sherwood, where I live. Are you gonna look at sort of any of that, or is it just the lines are where they are right now?
No, I think that's something the board's going to have to look at eventually. Now, whether it's at the same time we're trying to do the building projects, I'm not sure of that, but we need to take a look at that in regards to even out some numbers in some of our buildings eventually.
And we've talked about that,
Right.
and that's always a hard topic,
Exactly.
again, because people they get nervous about change.
But the renovations at the buildings are going to be such that we don't have to do it at the same time.
No.
Whatever we do, the buildings will accommodate it if and when we do it.
That's correct.
Go back to the 6 elementary question, the 52%. Your level of statistical confidence level, it's within that range but to hit 50%. My concern, coming in, I was all for the 4 elementary plan that saved us $1 million a year. But I've said all along, I'm not going to support a plan that has a statistically significant no hope of passing. So I want to go back to understand how significant the, when you zeroed in on the 6 elementaries, the need to keep our 6 elementaries at 52%, should I feel that that is a statement by the community that's something we need to hold on to?
I would think so, and I will hold judgment on that until I see the coding of the open-ended question to see how many people picked up on that as a positive for the lower cost plan and a negative for the higher cost plan.
Dallas, are we going to be able to take John's PowerPoint and put it online?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that you all will have a copy and
Will
access
we
this?
put this preliminary on, or will we wait till you're done?
I would
No,
suggest
that's a good
putting this on,
question.
and then we can add to it when.
Let's do both.
If you do that, like, bold it that it's preliminary somehow. I mean, I
Okay.
guess it is bolded, but.
Your data's not changing, right? It's just the...
Right, yeah, but I mean, there'll be a lot more detail.
Well, I think one
There'll
of
there'll
the
be charts and
Are you-
graphs.
Are you
and-
comfortable with us putting this out? I mean, obviously,
Sure.
we're here in public.
I think we even said that in the introduction.
Okay.
we said that the results will be on the district's website.
I mean, I think one of the reasons that the community has been educated is because of what we've been doing in these meetings. At least I hope that's the reason.
Well, and also the OFCC came out, which,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm kind of glad you said that may have had some effect on the survey results. I am glad.
Other questions for John? Thank you so much for
Okay.
really a great report and
Okay.
spoon-feeding us on this. I appreciate it.
The final will be even greater, okay? All right, thank you.
Dallas, are you able, or Rick, are you guys able to talk to us about timing considerations, you know, where we need to be, when we need to be there, if we're going to do something for a November ballot?
Yeah, both of us can do that. I'll let Rick give you the kind of the exact dates, but really, we're kind of getting up to, we're getting up to a critical point that if we were going to be on the November ballot, we need to make some decisions in the very near future. To have everything completed to the, I mean, at the end of the game here, everything completed into the Ohio Department of Education as well as Ohio the state itself, everything has to be completed and in their hands by July 29th. And so when you back from that a little bit, there's two or three.
You said July 29th?
July 29th. There are some things that need to be done fairly quickly. There's two very important pieces of that. One's called a resolution of necessity, and one's called a resolution to proceed, but there are some other pieces in between there, in fact, in the beginning that we need to do. Rick and I talked about it just this morning. There's about 6 steps that we would need to do fairly quickly, like we'd like to have the board authorize us to go ahead and start on those things right now. Even if we were to go ahead or not go ahead, we need to do that. And
Is that like the resolutions that, remember when we did the last one?
part of it, one of
We
those
asked-
steps would be the resolution. We wouldn't have to have that specifically today, but you could give us the authorization to go about it and beginning to prepare those for the board. But I'll let Rick talk about the 6 steps that need to be done, like in the ASAP. And Rick?
Yeah, the July 7th, the first, we talk typically of the resolution of necessity and the resolution to proceed, but really the resolution of necessity has 5 others with it, which are selecting bond counsel, bond underwriting, having a resolution declaring the intent with respect to temporary advances if the project, capital expenditures be made from subsequent borrowings. That's a compliance one. A resolution directing the fiscal officer to apply for authority to exceed the 4% limitation. Either of these plans, or the 98 for sure, is above the 4% of our net indebtedness. So we would have to have not above 9%, which is 107, but between 4 and 9. So it's not a test as much as it is a notification to the Department of Taxation and the curriculum instruction superintendent. So, and then the 5th one is a resolution to certify the maximum maturity of the bonds, and that is looking at the mixture of projects, determine the useful life of those, somewhere probably between 28 and 32, 33 years. So those 5 are fairly standard and can be, we talked to bond counsel today, they would be able to generate those fairly quickly. The 6th one is number related, and that is 1 or more resolutions declaring necessity to issue bonds. And that's what would be sent to the county auditor to determine some of the millage and dollar amounts that we would need to bring back to the board to get the next step. So timing-wise, we have a meeting on the 23rd, 2 weeks from today. If we are not, depending on what scheduling is done between now and then, or that week of that would be really the 3 weeks of a window to do something, to do the necessary steps to make it by the 7th.
All right, so if I'm hearing this, gosh, I hate thinking out loud. It's always dangerous. If I'm hearing you correctly, we don't have to decide anything tonight. All we have to do is give you authorization so that you can talk to bond counsel, talk to,
Prepare the documents and the
Yeah,
letters.
the
well,
issue-
but on the
issue is-
resolutions, we'd have to say, we want you to do, prepare resolutions for our consideration at the June 23rd meeting of, and we could give you different ones. We could have you do 98 and 173 both. We don't have to decide on those tonight. You just bring them to
resolutions-
us at the June 23rd meeting, correct?
The resolutions do have one point that if there's a PI included, the statutes are different. So we would need to have the combination, if there is a permanent
So
improvement
4.
levy, and the
Well,
amount
the
of that. permanent
173 has to have the PI.
improvement, either now or as funding occurs. The other is a total choice. In the 98 would be choice now or choice whenever. And
Well, we're just tearing too much tonight for us to make any decisions, and I think, and we're still waiting on the final report, but I'd like to at least have you guys prepare resolutions that we may or may not consider at the June 23rd meeting, and if we don't do it at the June 23rd meeting, we have to schedule another special meeting before July 7th, right?
preferably that week, the week of the 23rd.
There's a meeting at 5:30 on
June
June 23rd,
Correct.
correct? Another facilities meeting, correct?
Correct.
What's going to happen at that meeting? Will we
Well-
have John's final report then?
I hope so.
We'll have it, but is that what we're going to be doing primarily, or
That's going to have to be nuts and bolts discussion, right?
following the final report? Correct?
Because if we can't come to consensus tonight, I would hope that we could at that meeting, because to make this timetable,
Yeah, the only thing, and not a glutton for meeting punishment, but if he's ready next week, we should consider that.
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, it's 2 weeks. I mean, and there's meat and potatoes that need to happen before the 23rd, and to not use that time, I think. we
Well, but
should
what
consider
I don't
that.
want to do, in fairness to the board and in fairness to the community that's here this evening, I think we can give you instructions to prepare these resolutions. We may give you a bunch of different ones as we talk through it, but I think the board needs an opportunity to think about what we've heard, and I'd like to give the community an opportunity this evening for public commentary and to light up our phone lines and our emails if they want to before we make our final decisions.
Well, another reason about next week, Jim, and for the board to consider is if John is done, that's really the final information to all of you to consider for the 23rd. So if, that way it's public, it's out there. So I'm just throwing out, let's say next Wednesday, he's got a final report, we can find that out, and then we could have a meeting, talk about the final report, and then publish that final report, and then have another meeting a few days after where you could act on that report, or if that was your...
That sounds like a good idea to me. Are we available next week? I mean, I can and will be.
Yeah. Could, also, can we get a number for all-day kindergarten in addition to the 98 million, whatever that number might be?
good question.
Well, one of the thoughts I had is, and I'm not suggesting we should or shouldn't do anything, but I'd like to at least leave the option open, is we know the 98 and the 173 with and without a half mil PI, but I'd like to consider 5 million on the 98 just for whether it's all-day kindergarten or potential cost overruns. Again, I'm not saying we should or do it, but if we're going to ask you to prepare resolutions, I'd like to have that at least available to us when we talk again.
We can do that.
Comments? Tony, Julie, Forrest, Randy?
Once we get the final report, do we have to wait till a meeting to post that? Can we just post it?
We can post it.
Okay.
Just
That's what I'd say. As soon as we get it, let's just put it on the website.
Yeah, good idea.
But just to be clear, the final report, the numbers aren't going to change.
Well, if your question is could we decide this evening, I suspect the answer is we could.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate to actually make a decision
That's
and
my
vote
point.
for it. But just for discussion purposes, it seems like we could have a little bit more discussion to see how close we are to consensus.
And this was a big, we placed a lot of confidence in this. It just came out tonight, we'd be crazy to vote or
Oh, yeah.
consider anything tonight. So, and, you know, word will get out now that it is out. Even though it's late turnout tonight, word will get out.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my thought, is there's a lot to digest tonight. Let's let people digest it. There's not, gosh, we've got all the time in the world.
Well, from an operational standpoint, though, do we need another meeting before the 23rd, or is the 23rd?
No, I think we do. Your idea was, or Rick's idea was, that we get together as soon as John has his final report. We can post it, but let him explain it to us and
Plus,
have our opportunity for
I
questions.
think there may be other, what I think would be good, you said there would be other information from other districts and other issues that have gone up that I think can help our decision too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, more
So-
information is always going to be good.
We ought to look at a meeting sometime next week, probably Wednesday or Thursday, to give them a chance to finish. And then June 23rd, we'll have the resolutions and hopefully be in a position to make a decision.
I'm out of town Wednesday through Saturday, and I can't change it.
We won't be making a decision. Will you be able to maybe participate by phone? It's mostly
Sure.
just to listen
Okay.
to John.
No.
Is that right? We wouldn't be making decisions. We'd be just getting the report and having discussion, right?
You may want to fine-tune the options that we would present on the 23rd. Once again, those are not voted at that special meeting, but
Right.
giving dowside direction. We will prepare, at the will of the board, I'll work to get the 5 statutory standard resolutions ready tomorrow. The one that is fill-in-the-blank money-wise is the resolution of necessity, which doesn't include that PI flavor to it.
Well, we know
So-
what at least 4 of those are going to look like. They're going to be 98 and 173, each with and without a PI, right? And then the question is whether we want to look at 103, some 98 plus maybe 5 for cost overruns or all-day kindergarten.
Or something else that may come up.
Or something else that may come up. That's right.
That's what I think that meeting would be.
Are we assuming a half-mil PI?
We're assuming that it may be considered, so that
But I mean-
Rick will, on the 98, he'll have 2 resolutions. One resolution's at 98 million, the other is 98 million plus the half-mil PI.
That's my question, is we're assuming that it is a half-mil. If we do a
Oh.
PI, it is a half-mil.
That's what we've always discussed.
And the one thing to consider is the 98 and the half mil probably keeps you in the 4s. 102 and a half mil, we can work on that, I don't know, just we're
close.
pushing that.
it's right at the top of the 4s, I would think.
And interest could change, I mean, there's other
Sure.
variables, this is not a given. I mean, there's things that change those numbers a little bit too, so we gotta be careful. I just
And that's
wanna-
my concern, because
Right.
right now, if you buy into the data, you've got an option that looks like it has a chance of passing. If we add to that, how does that change it?
And we got to be
Are we at a
careful.
breaking point? I don't know.
I don't think that's really data. The next data, I think would be helpful.
Right.
You know, just practically speaking, I can't visualize all this work going on at one time. That's a lot of work going on at one time in the district. I mean, it's a massive amount. Every school will be touched. Wilson will be gone. How can that happen? I mean, that we have this much work going on in the district at one time with one
Well,
general contractor.
who said, we don't have to do it all at once? Matter of
It-
fact, I would assume that we would not do it all at once.
It would be phased in, Julie.
How would the phase-in be, though?
Well,
We don't know yet.
we'd have to get back to you on that, but we could do it. It could be phased in over a couple-year period.
Well, I still consider that at once. I mean, I know it's not simultaneous at
Sure.
once, but it's still.
Well,
Let's do it.
it's going to be tough.
Yeah, no, I
Talk
guess.
about that.
Right, but
I mean, we've
yeah,
got-
I'd like to see how that works.
Well, maybe at our next meeting, Joe, do you think you could help address that to us?
Yeah, I mean, just to So there's some visualization of what's
Sure.
going to happen.
Because there's some logic in heading up in some of the other buildings while you replace one or two. So, yeah, I would not assume that this was going to, never assume this was going to happen,
It won't happen overnight.
well, within one school year or
Yeah.
even two. That just defied logic.
There
but-
has to be some kind of a proposed sequence, I would think, that somebody at some point is going to tell us that's the best way to do it. I just want to grasp it a little better.
Yeah, because if we did it all at once, we'd be renting trailers at 6 buildings or more, and so that makes no sense at all.
Make sure the trailer company.
Yeah, right.
Hey, Jim, just so we're clear, is that we could on the 23rd take 2, 4, 6, or as many, we did we took several, because all we're going to do, those are fact-finding to find out what that funding is. So we can do more than.
Oh, you can go with more than one resolution.
Right,
Yes.
I don't want to say that we have to narrow it,
Okay.
because we have to narrow it, I'm just saying, but if there's some options that are not being considered, then obviously we're only going to take the ones that are. So
Right.
that would be, maybe next week's meeting could determine if there's anything on the table or off the table.
I'm with you. So by July 7th, we just have to send whatever is under consideration,
Needs to be there,
To-
and so that's why we were,
needs to be there.
yeah, and received and blessed, so.
And you and Dallas are both gone the week of July 4th, too, right?
That's correct.
So the end of that week would be preferred, the end of the week of the 23rd, but whatever we need to do, we'll do.
All right, do we want to look at a day next week for the meeting?
I'll have to get back. I don't have mine.
All right, why don't you reach out to us?
Are you thinking evening, Jim?
Yeah, I assume Wednesday or Thursday evening, I guess.
Can we confirm with John, he's got to get done to make that
Yeah.
worthwhile?
That's right,
So-
he's gotta get
so
done. That's the point.
If he can be done, then we'll back up from there.
Other discussion, or should we do public commentary?
Public commentary.
As you all know, this is
Jump on that one pretty quick.
not a public meeting, but a meeting held in public. We do welcome public commentary. If you'd like to address the board, there are green cards up at the front. Just fill one out, and we will hear from you. Anyone? Any cards? No.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Other discussion?
The way we can squeeze this in by Tuesday evening, the 17th.
John?
It's all up to John.
It's all up to John.
My first call tomorrow will be to John, or tonight, and just say, when does he think reasonably so that he can have the rest of the data to us? If it's available by
That's fair.
Tuesday evening, that's a good
Yeah.
question,
And that's possible. I
and
think.
it's a possibility.
But isn't it?
Over a week, yeah.
And then, so we could look at Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of next week, and
I'll do
yeah,
whatever
It's a
we
week.
need to do.
The date is there, it's just compiling it, so
Mhm.
he's got everything he needs. Okay, then what I've heard then is that Rick and I will go ahead and begin preparing the documents, those 5 pieces. We'll start looking at some resolutions, not putting anything under, but just the wording of resolutions. Resolutions that would be for a specific dollar amount plus a potential PI, and ones without. So we'll have some of those ready that we could, even at the, if we needed to, at the work session next week, you could decipher that out a little bit more. And if we needed to, we could even do that on the 24th, or the next board meeting, which is the 23rd.
Anything, Rick, Dallas, that we ought to be considering for
The only other thing.
purposes of dotting our i's and crossing our
Well, the only
t's
other
here?
thing is the all-day kindergarten. What you're asking is that we can do this, put together what it would cost facility-wise
Facility-wise.
for the all-day kindergarten option, what that would cost, and then, and we can get that to you as
Yeah,
well.
Forget about whether it's mandated or not. And I know
Sure.
we've sort of talked around this before, but we've had a lot of folks asking for it. We have a lot of requests for all-day kindergarten.
I don't, we always have the request.
I mean, not the request, like, I mean, do we get do people want it? Do you think?
The survey
Some-
suggests some
Yeah,
do.
yeah, the survey suggests some do, and they actually, they do. I
Not
mean,
obviously for moms that work outside the home, it's a great
Right,
benefit.
right.
But I'm
There-
wondering if for
There are
individual
others.
Heights, is it a great benefit?
Well, you know,
there are
I
others
see-
who would say no.
I would say 2 reasons that we'd like to, if we can reasonably plan for it. One is, we may not have a choice. I mean, it's not on the table now, but it has been on the table, and it could be again. The other reason is, you know, to keep our district competitive, it might be something we want to offer.
So then, so for the, as early as the next board meeting, we may have that data available for you in regards to what it would cost for the facilities option of all-day kindergarten. And then, so we'll have that as well. Is there anything else that Rick might need?
The only other thing is looking out to July. It's going to be here before you know it. We have at least one and possibly two special meetings based on the calendar. One is, let's say the 23rd, we have several resolutions required, several money resolutions. We get that information back the first week of July. The board will need to process that to see what they would like to move forward with a resolution to proceed. That would need to be done, and our July meeting is too late. So that public meeting in July will be, it's due the next day, and that can't happen per legal counsel. So we would have to have a special meeting for the resolution to proceed. So maybe one meeting to talk about the results, maybe not, maybe a special meeting and then extend it, you know, and vote, but definitely a meeting, either at that meeting or another meeting to say this is what we're going to do, if that's the will of the board, and a resolution to proceed. It can be very, it doesn't have to be a long meeting because the board will have processed that information, but it is, so that the primary time for that would be in the 2021-22, somewhere in there, if possible, but the 29th will not work.
Why don't we, when we try to get dates for next week, just, we'll give you, remind us, we'll give you
July
our
10th.
availability for our July special meeting too.
Consideration would be to have our meeting on the 21st.
Move the meeting.
Move our 28th meeting.
That's actually a good idea. I'm okay with that.
Regular meetings are always better for a final decision,
Exactly.
so I like that too.
Very good
We have
suggestion.
plenty of time to advertise it. Good job.
That's a good idea.
Every once in a while. It's like a blind squirrel. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay, very good.
This survey, I think, has been very helpful because frequently things come back and it's inconclusive. This was dramatic, it was not inconclusive, although we've added two variables. One is kindergarten and the other is PI, but we just will work through that.
There's going to have to be, this is a gratuitous comment, I know, but if we go forward with this renovation, encompassing renovation in a new Wilson, we have to so emphasize what the renovation means.
Exactly.
And I don't like,
Pictures and
I don't like the
videos.
No,
renovation to
absolutely.
new, you know, but if you all want to use that, I can get past it. But, you know, Randy said, I think last meeting, it's amazing what some of the renovations have looked like, and there just has to be such an emphasis on that.
Yep.
Pretty pictures,
Yes.
not that pretty means, you know, but a visual, so people
Visual.
can
Truth.
understand.
They need to see truth,
And,
what it really is.
Right. So that the other, all the folks in the rest of the district other than Wilson realize that this is a great thing all around.
Other comments, questions for anybody? Last chance on public commentary? All right, well, thank you all so very much for coming, giving up your first summer evening. Our next meeting is to be determined.
Next week, sometime.
And the one after that is now the 21st, are we anticipated?
No, we'll have a June meeting.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the July meeting,
Yeah.
and ask about the July.
That's what I mean, so that's the 21st now.
Well, not yet.
Okay.
We need a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, motion to adjourn, please.
Can we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Mr. Tepfer?
Dr. Heiss?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissinger?
Yes.
Mr. Hamelgarn?
Yes.
Mr. Fruman?
Yes.
Start our new job today.